Sheriff. Sure. Squeeze around. I don't want y'all behind me. I'll get over here so I have enough room. Make sure these guys' cameras get in. Come on, Sheriff, over here. Lieutenant, you got it? Okay. Everybody ready? First, I want to introduce everyone that's with me today. First, Sheriff P.J. Tanner from Beaufort County, Sheriff Donald Hipp from Jasper County, Chief Joe Bapkowitz from the Bluffton Police Department, Chief Sam Woodward from the Hardyville Police Department, Lieutenant Sean Harley, to my right, from the State Law Enforcement Division, commonly known as SLED, Lieutenant Ryan Fazekas with the Bluffton Police Department, Agent Jarius Richardson from SLED, as well as Agent Sean Murray from SLED. At 10:30 a.m. yesterday, agents from the State Law Enforcement Division, or SLED, took an individual into custody for his alleged participation in the March 5, 2021 murder of DJ Fields, the attempted murder of E.J. Graham, and the attempted murder of Kylan Simmons. He is a co-defendant now to Jimmy Green. As many of you recall, we prosecuted Jimmy Green for his involvement in this case in May of this year. Green was sentenced by Judge D. Craig Brown of Florence to 40 years in prison, and because he was sentenced on a murder conviction, he has to serve every day of that 40-year sentence. The individual arrested yesterday was a 15-year-old. He is 18 now, but he was 15 at the time of the crime. Accordingly, we have to remove this case at the beginning from family court. As a juvenile, he has been petitioned for the following charges. And a petition in family court is the equivalent of a warrant in General Sessions Court. Our office has prepared juvenile petitions for the following crimes: murder, 2 counts of attempted murder, assault and battery by a mob, 1st degree, assault and battery of a mob, 2nd degree. We will be asking the family court to waive this juvenile from family court to General Sessions, to the Court of General Sessions, so that he can be prosecuted as an adult. We expect that procedure to start next week. We also expect the juvenile to be in family court in Beaufort County next week. He is currently housed at the Department of Juvenile Justice. If he is prosecuted as a juvenile, he can be held until his 21st birthday. If he is prosecuted as an adult, he faces the exact same sentence and sentence range that Jimmy Green did. Those sentence ranges are for murder, 30 years minimum to life in prison, at which time he would have to serve every day of that sentence. Assault and battery of mob, 1st degree, carries a sentence of not less than 30 years. Assault and battery by mob, 2nd degree, carries a potential sentence not less than 3 years, not more than 25 years. Attempted murder carries a potential sentence up to 30 years. Now, for the procedures in family court, which again will, I believe, start next week, at least in the initial phases, the United States Supreme Court has handed down a number of factors that the judge has to take into consideration in order to determine whether or not a juvenile is prosecuted in family court or in the Court of General Sessions. I have handouts for you today that outline that specifically, but those considerations are as follows: the seriousness of the alleged offense, whether the offense was committed by in an aggressive, violent, and premeditated or willful manner, whether there's sufficient evidence for a grand jury to return an indictment in the Court of General Sessions, the desirability of the trial and disposition of this defendant in the same court as the other defendants, the individual's criminal history, and the prospects of adequate protection of the public and the likelihood of reasonable rehabilitation by the use of services currently available to the judge. Again, these decisions will be made by a family court judge, but they will be instituted by our office, or initiated, should I say, by our office. As I said, the individual is currently being housed in the Department of Juvenile Justice. We cannot release at this time his identity, nor any identifying factors, as he is being prosecuted at this time in family court. If he is waived up to the General Sessions, then we can provide that information. Now, finally, and again, I would like to, I've introduced the people that are behind me. One of the reasons that I wanted to hold this announcement was not only to announce the arrests in this case, but also to publicly recognize and thank the members of these law enforcement agencies, specifically their leaders who are here today, for the work that they put in. It is a pending case, and I cannot answer any questions about the facts of this case, nor specifically what led to this arrest. However, I will say that their arrest was made possible by the hard work of investigators, lab assistants, lab technicians, lab experts from all of the agencies that are standing with me. The work, this investigation has taken place with SLED, the Beaufort County Sheriff's Office, the Jasper County Sheriff's Office, the Hardeeville Police Department, the Bluffton Police Department. This work has included officers and investigators from each and every one of these agencies, regardless of jurisdiction. It also includes the crime labs of both SLED as well as our local Beaufort County Sheriff's Office crime lab. The arrests today, again, I cannot give you any specifics of the fact, were made possible by the work of these people, and I want to publicly thank them for their assistance as well. I met with the family, some of whom are here today, this morning, to outline this to them as well. Again, I'll be glad to answer any questions, and of course, if you have any questions for any of these law enforcement heads or investigators, you're welcome to ask them, but again, I will not be able to answer any questions as to any specifics of this case. Anything?
Does the gentleman have a criminal record, or has he been in trouble before?
That is a factor that the family court judge will go into, and so at a time in the family court proceeding, that will come up and that will be discussed. I cannot give you that information at this time. It's not proper for me to discuss any defendant's criminal history publicly. I can do it in the courtroom, but I can't do it out here. So I would suspect that that will come up. It is certainly one of the elements that the family court judge has to take into consideration when they decide whether or not it's proper to prosecute them either in family court or adult court. So it will be addressed, but it'll be addressed in a courtroom. I can't give you that information now.
When will that decision be made as far as a timetable from making that decision? Well,
it's a good question. The first thing we have to do is what's called a detention hearing. The individual is detained now. He has to go back to the family court, and for the family court, I would expect them to send that individual back to Department of Juvenile Justice to start the analysis of the defendant's prior history, not only criminal, if there is such, but also their maturity levels and things like that. At some point, we will then file the paperwork to ask the judge to consider the waiver hearing. The judge will then schedule that. It has in the past taken several months to complete because it becomes sort of a mini trial. It's not something that we can simply stand up and make a motion for. We have to put up evidence as to all of the elements I've outlined, as well as the elements that in the handout that I gave you as well. And there are 8 of those, but they are quite encompassing. So there's a lot of evidence that has to go before the judge. And then, of course, we're on the judge's timetable. That will be all done in family court in Beaufort County, but it will not. I will not be able to give you a specific timeline because that will basically be on the judge's timeline.
Can law enforcement talk a little bit about the challenges of finding this gentleman, and after obviously the first 2 gentlemen were picked up so quickly in this process, now suddenly it's taken a long time to be able to find this 3rd person? There have been bolos, there have been a lot of things out there.
Yeah, and I'll open that up to anybody that really wants to cover that. Let me just say this though too, because I think this is an important issue. When it comes to time, I think we live in a time in where we expect immediate results. We certainly see that in television every day, where you see somebody that's depicted as arrested, commits a crime, arrested, and is convicted and sent to prison in a matter of a television show. The timing is important in the concept. I know that's something that the community wants as quickly as possible, but it is much more important that it is thorough. And the real issue here is the dedication it takes of these law enforcement agents standing behind me, their departments, the people working for them, to continue pushing until they get the right answer. So I think that's probably the most important point to make, is that this was an investigation that started at the time of the crime and has continued and has never slacked up. And the people behind me have been dedicated to bring the right answer before us, no matter how long it took. And it took some time. Some of these things, and I'm sure the sheriffs and the chiefs can give you a better idea, but some of these cases, they can gather the information in 24 hours, and sometimes it takes years. So that's one of those things. But I'll open it. I'll be glad for any of y'all to address that. Sheriff? Sure.
You bet.
Sure.
And I really can't add any more than what the solicitor just added. Everything that we do, every investigation that we're involved in, there are challenges. But there's a window of opportunity along with those challenges as well. So what we do is a process. In some cases, it takes less time to process evidence. It takes less time to process the case and have an end result. But I know it appears today that this has taken a good while, but that's been a part of the process. So, I completely agree with the solicitor and where we're at now, but how we got here is extremely important, and there's no rush to do what needs to be done, and I think the end result is going to be very apparent.
Just general sense, was there a break? Was there something that maybe led to this? Obviously, we've been looking for people for a long time. You guys put out pictures long ago, too, for this. And I'm not talking about the time factor, but it does take time. This is a close-knit community in that point. Was there something that came up that, without revealing much about the case, that led to this point now?
Yes. Well, and there were a lot of things, and it was something, again, I think the sheriff hit it dead on. It's a process. It's never just one particular thing, but there were a number of things that led through the process. And but I don't see any way that I can outline those to you without getting into the facts of the case, which it wouldn't be proper for me to do. I know you had a question. I apologize. Yes, sir.
Is there other cases in the 14th Circuit of a 15-year-old being tried as an adult?
Not now, not pending right now, and this is it's relatively unusual because you've got a 15-year-old. I think, and I was discussing this, I think, with the family earlier. In my tenure as solicitor, we have probably asked to waive up a juvenile probably less than 10 times over the time period starting in 2006. It is not particularly common for us to be in this position. However, we have some very experienced. We have a very experienced juvenile prosecutor that has already started the preparation. We have gone through this process. I think the last time was probably about 3 or 4 years ago. And so we know what we're doing with it. We know how the process works, and I expect it to be, it will take some time, but I expect it to be a pretty smooth process.
Why do you believe this is such an important step in this case, trying that 15-year-old as an adult?
I think that if you're looking at a sentence range, the fact that the juvenile court is limited in the amount of time that they can hold him. He's now 18 years old. The most he can serve if he stays in family court is until his 21st birthday. This is the obviously most serious offense that the South Carolina law has, and it carries the most severe punishment. So it's important for us. We believe it's proper to try him as an adult. Obviously, he's an adult now. He wasn't an adult when this took place, but I think it's a proper thing. Again, it's not common. It's not something that we do often, but it is something we do when we think it's the right thing to do, and in this case, that's what we think. So, again, and I think I may have said this earlier, but I do want to make sure that I reiterate this. This individual, although charged with some very serious offenses, and we're announcing these charges, is still presumed innocent, and that individual remains innocent and presumed innocent until he is prosecuted and successfully and convicted in a court of law, whether that be in family court or in the court of general session. So I must remind you, although these are serious charges, we have brought it forward so that you would know what has happened with this case. There's been a great deal of interest since this took place, but it is important to recognize that he is still presumed innocent at this point and will remain so until he's convicted, if and when he's convicted.
Do you now believe you have everyone who was in the car firing bullets that night that killed
Yes.
DJ?
Yes. And this was the third individual that these people behind me have been working to find since March of 2021.
Any more arrests possible connected to this case at this point?
I do not believe so. I don't believe so. So if there's anything else, and I don't want to cut any of you people off, but thank you very much for being here. I appreciate you understanding the limitations of what we can give you. And again, I want to sincerely thank all the members of law enforcement, the heads of law enforcement, for working so well and so diligently on this case. So thank you all very much.
Solicitor, since you
Yes,
have
sir.
everything set up, could we, I don't know if
Certainly.
Juan and Kima, you guys want to say anything about this at all?
Well, we would just like to thank the solicitor's office and the other agencies for putting the amount of time that these past 2 years has gone by. So my family, from y'all to y'all, I would just like to say thank you for putting the time and effort into bringing this person in.
For both of you, what does this mean now to have that third suspect behind bars, the three people who did make that shoot, fire those shots?
It means everything to me to know that it won't bring our son back, but it'll take somebody, you know, dangerous off the streets, you know, for possibly hurting somebody else. So once again, we can't thank y'all enough for putting y'all time in and doing y'all jobs. And to us, it's just, you know, just trusting the process and trusting the law.
How difficult has that been over the last few years, trusting the process?
It's been a nightmare ever since March 5th of 2021. And we can't thank the people of this town and outside of this town for continuing to support us. It's speechless and it's priceless. I mean, you cannot put a price tag on it for what these guys do every day, from going out, you know, from stepping outside their homes and hoping they come back.
Thank you all for being here.